Peter Willers is joining us, standing for Onchan. Your first time on this? What's put you into the fold for this one?
Well, I'm doing it because Peter Carron isn't. Peter Carron was going to stand again for Onchan, where he's been in MHK for many years, very successfully. But then he decided not to, but he encouraged me to stand in his stead, saying that he would help me go round see all the people on the doorstep and that sort of thing. And of course, I've always supported Liberal Vannin views. I mean, my mother voted Liberal when I was growing up. There's nothing within the Liberal Vannin policies which I don't agree with. There are things in the Liberal Vannin policy which there aren't things in the Liberal Vannin policy that I want to do, but that doesn't mean I can't agree with what they do want to do, and that's where we are. That's why I started so late.
Okay, I always ask this question though. If you did have any fallout, would you feel, if you left the party or whatever, would you carry on as independent, or would you go for?
No, I wouldn't do that. That's a dirty trick.
I'd go for a by-election.
I'd go for a by-election, yes, because you can't ride in on the back of a party.
People have done it in the past.
Yeah, well, that's one of the problems with Manx politics. It needs to change. Manx politics.
You like party politics?
Well, party politics is much more successful. Otherwise, you have coalitions, and essentially, as I see it, the Manx political system creates 24 individual MHK parties. So there should be a coalition of 24 running the government, and then that might work a bit. But of course, you only end up with the Chief Minister party, so that everybody follows what he wants, otherwise they get the sack. So it doesn't work like that. You've got to be on a basis where it's important that you follow your views, and you're not coerced by having to agree with the Chief Minister so that just to keep your job. And this is one of the major problems with politics on the Isle of Man. No one feels able to criticise anyone else, and you get the position where you end up with 24 incompetent people just taking the cash and not really doing much else.
Yeah, you have savaged the competence levels, not just of MHKs, but of the civil service.
Well, you've only got to reflect on what's gone on in the last 5 years here on the Isle of Man to be able to do that.
What could you change, though, and how could you change it? I mean, civil servant-wise, the people who are running the departments behind the scenes, how are you going to deal with them?
Well, then what you have to do is you have to, first of all, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of very able people in the civil service. There always are, but unless they're managed by the elected people, they will do what they want to do, which suits them.
But you're saying they're incompetent as well, aren't you? So
no, I'm not saying they're incompetent.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not saying they're incompetent. I wouldn't know until I've met them.
Yeah.
And then I would make that decision. But I'm sure there's a lot of competent people there, but they're not being managed properly by the MHKs.
Okay, yeah, but MHKs, you've got to be competent there.
Well, there's nothing you can do about MHKs because it's a free society. Yeah. You're entitled to be an incompetent MHK, and the only way is you're not going to get voted in next time. We don't have a system where they can be dismissed. I mean, even in the UK, I mean, they have 600 incompetent MPs, or some of them are anyway. Yeah. But because there's such a number of them, the incompetent ones don't really matter very much because there's plenty of competent ones anyway. Although one has to question that from time to time, and that's the great thing of party politics. You get it questioned all the time, and those people who are in the background who might be much better MPs don't come through because the old boy system keeps the incompetent ones in place, and without that challenge.
So we've got the Liberal Vannin policies, and you say you're totally on board with those.
Yeah.
What are your ones? Because you're allowed to bring your own flavour as well, aren't you? Have you got anything particular you're telling the doorsteps in Onchan, or vice versa? They're telling you.
Well, I mean, they're telling me. There's all sorts of things they're telling me, but most of them are that with regard to the government, they're very concerned about the waste of money. I mean, the prom comes up time and time again, health comes up time and time again, and things which they seem quite okay with. I mean, so far as COVID is concerned, I've not heard a really seriously bad word about the way that the Isle of Man did a fair job on COVID, but that's not, you can't run a country on COVID, because it's hopefully here currently and will be controlled, and then we'll be able to get on with life as it's always been.
And are you on side with how we are dealing with it now, being openish, nearly fully open?
Openish. Well, I suppose. My wife would say it's too open. I would say it's not open enough. I have the view that once you've been vaccinated, double vaccinated, you should be able to be out there, because it's the only way it's going to test the vaccination quality. And then you bring that forward, because if you've had the vaccinations and they don't work, as long as you don't die, you're the right candidate to be able, from them to be able to take data from, to be able to see what needs to be tweaked on the medication to ensure that it does work in the future. So that's the way vaccination should work. It shouldn't be that once you've been vaccinated you have to be concerned about where you are. And I grew up as a child. I mean, I can remember the iron lung being a very prevalent thing with polio and things like that. It was a thing, and as soon as I could, I was vaccinated for everything that I could be vaccinated for.
Your skill set, your day job, lawyer, right? Isn't it?
Yes.
So, where's your skill set if you were in government? Where would you think you'd be best?
I would make sure that whenever we were negotiating financial expenditure, that we had the right people doing that, rather than, as I understand it, I can only go by what I read, that with regard to such as the links ban, we were outgunned on the day. Well, you can't do that. You can't be in business and be outgunned on the day because you go bust the next day. The Isle of Man government doesn't, because all the money comes from the taxpayer and they just draw more out of the tax.
So where would you
funds.
like to be? I mean, you want to work in government, do you? Obviously, but you're still sort of the party, so you're sort of the opposition, if you like.
Well, exactly, I'm the opposition, but there's a big difference about working in government and having to keep your mouth shut, and working in government and pointing out all the things that are wrong. Now, I wouldn't cross the line from not following any of the Liberal Vannin policies, because they are, as far as I'm concerned, the way the world should work. I grew up with those policies. I grew up with that background.
Yeah. So, which department? Where would you be?
I would be in I'd probably want to be a roving one, so I could be where my talents could be really utilised better.
But if you were asked to join a government department, if you wanted to, would you? And which one would you particularly like, if any? I mean,
I don't really like any of them particularly. But
okay.
I would say I'd rather not join a party. I'd rather be
a department.
Called in as a roving sort of advisor.
But being a lawyer, are you policy and reform? I'm just trying to think, because lawyers.
Yeah, well, I mean,
what sort of lawyer are you?
I suppose my mainstay has been in property development, property construction, that sort of thing. So it's contract law and contract law of all stages, where you have to actually sit and negotiate and the nitty-gritty of what's going to happen when things go wrong. So you have to have a contract in place which is going to be able to
You've got to balance the books, right?
You have to balance the books. It's always, everything's a question of finance. Without that, I mean, in my view, the economy has got to grow. We've got to be able to change the system. It needs to become a business-friendly system here, not a business. Well, we'd like you, but don't believe everything we say on freedom to flourish, because it really doesn't quite exist in the way you think it might. And that's got to change. And we need to increase the population on the island. We need more people here. It's far too insular, and it will never ever become anything more than that unless it changes. I mean, really, there's been no significant change since I've been over here since 1986. That's 35 years, and it's no different.
Would you make it a full-time commitment, though, if you got the job? Would you be just doing this only, or keeping some practices going?
No, I don't have any practice. I just play around on the little bit of land we have, where we have my wife has a couple of horses, and that's.
I see, but you would see this as a full-time.
Oh, of course, it's a full-time job.
Right.
I mean, that's what you're getting paid for. You can't expect to take the money without putting in the time, and you don't. It's not even a question of being there. You just need to be thinking all the time about what's going on and taking part in that, and being able to assist and benefit the people who are. I mean, and of course, the civil servants have to run the show in many ways, but they need to have direction and control, which they don't have.
Okay.
It's the other way round.
To finish with, probably you, I think I know the answer I'm going to get. Who would you like to be the Chief Minister?
Me.
That wasn't the answer I was expecting. I was going to say Laurie Hooper. I thought you were going to say Laurie, but you would like to be Chief Minister?
Well,
no,
I could make a much better fist of it than the current one or any of the previous ones over the last several years. So
straight in, you put your name up there for the part?
Well, I would, yeah. Why not? I'm quite happy to take on any opposition. I always have been.